Let me set two very different time frames in the history of AEW up for you guys. Season 12 had a lot of different things about it, mainly due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, that isn't really exactly an important thing to discuss, but the different things about that season are very important to the topic of this video. More importantly, the fact that this season was the first season of AEW to not feature Mount Midoriyama in any capacity. The season opting for a Power Tower Finals consisting of only the top 8 ninjas from the finals. From there, those top 8 were placed in a small bracket to determine the winner, with the final 2 going head-to-head in a very quick Power Tower matchup to end the season. These two final ninjas were 5-time Ninja veteran Daniel Gil and 3-time Ninja veteran Austin Gray. Daniel Gil was a very well-known athlete, nicknamed the Kingdom Ninja. Gil was pretty famous, not only for getting to stage 3 multiple times and being in the runner-up of the previous season, but also just for his wild hair and many accomplishments on the course. I already mentioned his appearances on stages 3 and 4, but he also was the first conqueror of the Mega Wall, so everyone knew who Daniel Gil was. Austin Gray was definitely an up-and-coming newcomer at this point. Gray had competed on 2 seasons of AEW before Season 12. In Season 10, his first season, his big story was that he had donated a kidney to his best friend, Kaylee Adams, and it was basically held up as a very heroic act that he had performed. It was basically the only thing the show could talk about with Austin. Now, AEW really hammed this into the ground, and this is important because it basically became the only thing Austin was really known for throughout Season 10. Austin would come back in Season 11 only to have a shocking fall in the Seattle Tacoma Finals. So coming to AEW 12, Austin wasn't as well known. Austin was mostly well known for his heroic deed and not exactly who he was as a competitor, which would actually change within this season. Gray was only shown during his 2 finals appearances during this season before the Power Tower, but he was still built up as someone who was a contender to win. Not only that, Gray was also given a segment during the semifinals. Either way, though, this was still a climactic final showdown. The build-up to this final showdown was also really good, with the Power Tower being a lot of very short and quick races, a lot of them being very confrontational, especially in the final 4. We had just come off a race between Daniel Gil and Adam Whale, which was very, very, very close. And a not as close race between Austin Gray and Amir Malik. But just beyond the 100,000 grand prize, there was still a lot riding on this race. Now, let me jump you guys to 2025 and AEW 17, the most recent AEW season at the time of recording. Now, this season was also very different, and the second AEW season did not feature Mount Midoriyama as the finals. Unlike AEW 12, it was not due to a global pandemic. Here, it was mostly due to budgetary constraints due to AEW's falling in popularity and its attempt to keep up with its own trends. And now I've made a video about the racing in AEW, so I don't need to keep on beating that dead horse anymore. But to put it simply, this season took a total focus on the racing, turning the finals into a very messy round-robin style race tournament, taking together the top 60 from the finals, putting them into groups, 4 competitors apiece, and matching them up against each other. These finals were very messy, and the episodes were not exactly edited very well. The 2 competitors who would make it to the final matchup of this season were Beckstrand and Meunier, 2 top veterans from the previous season of AEW. Both had been in the top 5 of that season, and both had made it to stage 4, with Noah actually being in the top 3 in AEW 15 and 16, so he had a huge stack going into this race. But aside from that, however, unlike Daniel Gil and Austin Gray, these 2 did not have much going into this final matchup. And because of that, I can't say I cared for it, and I'm not sure how many other Ninja fans actually did. That's the subject of today's video. Despite AEW 17 being fundamentally a very similar season to AEW 12, and Daniel Gil vs. Austin Gray being a very similar matchup to Noah Munier vs. Beckstrand, I couldn't find myself caring who won it. And it really didn't matter to me personally. And I'm sure I'm not the only one of you guys to share that sentiment. But Why was that sentiment shared? Well, let's talk about it. Now, I want to establish a few ground rules for this discussion. This is a comparison between Noah Meunier and Kai Beckstrand, who they were as competitors as the show built them up, through not only their editing, but also just their runs in general. What this is not about is Kai Beckstrand and Noah Meunier as people. Obviously, these competitors' personalities are important in terms of their iconicness in the show and how much viewers are going to remember them, but it's not exactly public knowledge who these people actually are personally, and it really shouldn't be. So I wouldn't really say it's important to this overall discussion. And it's more just about who the viewers of the show see them as. That's what we're talking about in this video. And it really won't be much about them personally. It's more about the ninja careers. Yes. Speaking of ninja careers, this video, as previously mentioned, is not about the skill level either. The skill levels of Noah Meunier and Kai Beckstrand could be argued all day, but the main reason why I don't think it's important to this discussion is two major reasons. One, both these competitors are still competing today, and two, they're both very young. These competitors have a lot more growing to do, so there's a lot more time for them to get better at ninja. Not only that, any kind of analysis of their current skill level would probably become inaccurate pretty quickly anyway. And just like with the previous point, I really don't think it's very important into the matchup itself. These people made it to the top 2. Obviously, they're good. That isn't important. So, with that in mind, let's get into this. First off, who are Kai Beckstrand and Noah Meunier? Well, let's jump back a couple years to talk about that. Starting with Kai Beckstrand, Kai had actually been on the ninja scene for a very long time before AEW 17. Starting in 2018 with his appearance on AEW Junior Season 1, in the 11 and 12-year-old age group. Now, AEW Junior ain't exactly the most important thing to talk about in this video, but it's important for Kai Beckstrand because he ended up winning the first season and becoming a part of the top 4 in the second season. His appearances on Ninja Junior being an easy firepower for his future appearances on the show, making him a big star to look out for the future. Look out for once the age limit got lowered down to 15 during season 13. As a 15-year-old, Kai Beckstrand made his first appearance on the big show in that season, following on the striding steps in stage 2. From here, Kai Beckstrand would not compete in AEW 14 due to mostly unknown reasons, and because that's not really important to this video's discussion. But he would then go on to compete in AEW's 15 and 16, doing decently well. In AEW 15, he was built up as an up-and-coming competitor who had the skills to win it all. And then he fell on the jumping spider during Vegas. Argue this being the shock of that season. Going into season 16, he wanted redemption. And he basically got that, getting all the way to stage 4, as I mentioned earlier, being part of the top 5 of the season, although being the slowest on stage 4 in general. And he also had won a safety pass that season as well, which he did not have to use on stage 1. So going to AEW 17, Kai had a pretty good stats, and Kai would continue to dominate during the season. During his 9 runs up to the final matchup with Noah Meunier, Kai had never fallen once, clearing everything in his path. Not only that, having the fastest time in his qualifier and the second fastest time in his semifinal, as well as a pretty fast time on both racing courses. He had seemed to never really have a problem going forward, and he was shown pretty prominently in the show. First is that to Noah Meunier. Noah had not competed in AEW Junior, starting his career in AEW 15. But AEW 15 and 16 being two very good tournaments, where he would make it to stage 4 and place in the top 3 in both tournaments, coming in within seconds of claiming a Kaden Seha on stage 4. Now, this is an important distinction between Kai and Noah. Noah got very close to a Kaden Seha twice. Kai Beckstrand made it to stage 4 once, and otherwise only had a stage 1 fail and a stage 2 fail. Essentially speaking, AEW 16 was really the only time Kai got a chance to be a prominent athlete during the finals. With that going to AEW 17, Noah was even more poised to win than Kai, just going based off AEW's stats. But as a contrast to Kai, Noah was shown a lot less. You want me to get nitpicky? I will get nitpicky. AEW's editing absolutely slammed Noah Meunier in comparison to Kai Beckstrand. Not only just considering entering AW 17, but also the seasons they had competed in beforehand. For direct comparison, Kai Beckstrand competed in 4 seasons of AW, of you as previously mentioned. In season 13, he was fully shown twice during the qualifiers and semis, and fast forwarded in stages 1 and 2. In AW 15, he was shown in all 4 of his runs. In AW 16, he was also shown in all of his runs, being shown 7 times. And finally, in AW 17, he was shown in 8 out of his 10 runs, only being fast forwarded twice during the racing finals. Versus Noah Meunier. In AW 15, Noah was shown 6 out of his 7 runs, him only being fast forwarded during the semis. Now this is a pretty good stat, him being one of the top competitors of that season, but AW 16 is a huge contrast, with him only being shown twice and both of them being in the final episode of the season. Yep, throughout the entirety of Season 16, despite getting 2 very fast times during the qualifiers and Stage 1, he still was not shown, he was still only given fast forwards. So, if you didn't remember him from previous seasons, you probably didn't really know who he was going into Stage 3. Well, he would once again dominate, and as previously mentioned, get back into the top 3 of the season. Now, going to AW 17, Noah Meunier was shown slightly less than Kai, not getting his qualifier run shown, despite getting the fastest time in his round. From here, though, Noah was shown 7 more times throughout the season, including his semifinal one, where he would get a full-on segment. Now, in comparison to Kai Beckstrand, Noah Meunier was also talked about a lot less, too. Kai is a Beckstrand. As unimportant as that is, it is part of his ninja name. The Beckstrands have a long legacy of the show. Competing since AW 7, and Kai being part of that long lineage, versus Noah Meunier, who was really only standing on his stats until actually being iconic. He was the boyfriend to at the time, women's champion, Addie Herman. And as unfortunate as it is, being in a relationship is something that comes into play in terms of your status in A&W. It gives them more things to talk about, as Noah Meunier has gotten several segments about his girlfriend, Addie Herman. Although I would definitely argue the show talks more about Addie than Noah. Yes, Addie is a trailblazer in terms of the women, but Noah has way more accomplishments, so honestly, I would say that he should be talked about way more, at least comparably wise. Now, that's not a topic for this video. This is about Kai and Noah, not Noah and Addie. But I would argue that a lot of people didn't really know who Noah was aside from being Addie Herman's boyfriend, especially considering how little he was shown. So that's a talk about why Noah Meunier wasn't really all that easy to root for. The audience wasn't really given an easy way to know who he was, beyond just doing really well in previous seasons. Now, all that is mostly due to the show. It refusing to show, Noah Meunier made him way less iconic than Kai, just by proxy. But even in Kai's case, we still didn't really know much about these competitors and really know what to look for in terms of them. Aside from Noah being Addie Herman's boyfriend, there really hasn't been many traits about Noah they've really talked about. And similar to that, Kai hasn't really been given much aside from him being a Beckstrand. Now, going back to Season 12, Daniel, unlike both Kai and Noah, and even Austin to a certain degree, had a recognizable ninja name in terms of the Kingdom Ninja. And he was always called the guy with the unbelievable hair. It was something to him that really did stick out. Similarly, both Kai and Austin also have notable hair, with Austin always coloring his hair purple aside from Season 14, and Kai having that mohawk, having that very famous great blonde mohawk up till Season 15 of up till Season 17 of A&W. Noah doesn't have this aspect to him, and while yes, I wouldn't argue that looks so important, it still made them recognizable as ninjas. Something that Noah never really had. I would argue the most recognizable thing about Noah is his glasses, which might as well go to make you underestimate him versus make you think he's actually good. I would personally argue that knowing who your competitors are is very important, especially with a final matchup. Daniel Gil and Austin Gray, despite not competing for too long in terms of competitors, still had a lot of build-up in past AEW seasons and in the current one as well. Even if Austin Gray had one less shown one, the audience still knew who he was at the end of the day. I wouldn't argue the audience knew who Noah Meunier was, at least not super easily. Not at least not super easily, especially beyond his stats. At least Kai Beckstrand had more time, but I would still argue that beyond him being a Beckstrand, beyond his stats, there wasn't really much more to him. Strip these two of their A&W stats, and there wasn't really much to them in terms of A&W iconicness. Neither of them even really have a ninja name, as previously mentioned, which may not seem super important, but does make a competitor iconic. Don't you guys remember when a ninja name was so important to a competitor in order for the show to actually make you recognize them? There was just huge differences that make a Kai Beckstrand and Noah Meunier less iconic as competitors going into this race. Now let's talk about the aftermath, and particularly a comparison between Kai Beckstrand and Daniel Gil, in terms of being A&W champions moving forward in the sport. Now, it's really difficult to make this comparison, I will say, because we know what happened to Daniel Gil after he won A&W 12, versus not knowing what happened to Kai Beckstrand because it's current news. A&W 18 just finished filming, and obviously it's not going to air for a good couple months. And we are currently in the A&W off-season, and we don't really know how much more life the show has at this point. But, in general, I would argue that Daniel Gil winning Season 12 mattered a lot more than Kai Beckstrand winning Season 17. Even with Season 12 becoming irrelevant as Season 13 continued the show's format from before the pandemic, having the show traveling to multiple cities for qualifiers and semis. For both competitors, yes, it will be a big thing to boost them in terms of going into the following season, but winning A&W meant a lot more when Daniel Gil won on Season 12. Only 3 other ninjas had been champions beforehand, and in addition to that, Daniel had come very close previously. For Kai, if you want to count Daniel Gil's win, he is the 8th winner the show has ever had. And completing Stage 4 isn't exactly it is kind of less of a feat nowadays, because it's only less than nothing of the course since A&W 12. Isn't that just the fact that more people have done it since then? Yeah, both made it to Stage 4, timing out in the previous season, but I would argue that Gil was more brought up for that than Kai. I wouldn't be surprised if you guys actually forgot that Kai had climbed out that previous season on Stage 4. It was barely ever brought up. Versus Gil, who was brought up all the time. About the time was the main reason he was in contender to be the winner. Kai was mostly in contender being the winner because he was fast. And yeah, you could argue this is because they were looking for different things in the two of these ninjas in two very different times of the sport. But even so, A&W was a hard show to win back in Daniel Gil's age. In Kai Beckstrand's age, it was a lot more possible. We've had several Stage 4 appearances from many ninjas, and 4 more Condensehas since then. Overall, it just means a lot less. Yes, that's A&W's history to blame, but it still comes into play. It comes into play when it comes down to the impact Kai Beckstrand has on it as being an A&W as an A&W champion who did in Condon versus Daniel Gil. Not to mention the fact that unlike Daniel Gil, Kai is not going to get another chance like Condensehas. Yeah, the Vegas course is Mount Doriyama is likely not coming back here in the West. It's a terrible reality to live in, but but at the end of the day, as previously mentioned, Mount Doriyama is not in Season 17 and 18 because of budget cuts. In the show's production crew trying to find ways to make cheaper seasons, but still achieve the same amount of popularity, as the show is slowly but surely losing viewership for the very things they are doing to keep viewership. Which is ironic on its own, but I've had this discussion maybe 10 or so times, not only on the podcast, but also in solo discussion videos. So I'm not going to continue talking about it. Point is that due to that, Kai isn't really able to get much more than just being a champion again. He can't get anything higher than this. A Condensehas is a much more honorable claim than just being an A&W champion like Daniel became. But without the possibility of being able to Konzen, Kai isn't really capable of achieving much else, especially going into a season that has the same kind of format. This is actually very similar to something that happened with Vance Walker during Seasons 15 and 16. Vance had won Season 15, and was going to another season that was exactly the same for Season 16, even filmed days apart from Season 15. Which is irrelevant to this discussion, but it made Vance's win in W16 ultimately mean less, mostly because Doriyama hadn't changed since the last time he did it. Because it was days later, but that's the point. Just like Kai, the subsequent season that Vance is going into as the A&W winner is the exact same kind of season to where the result is exactly the same, with almost no differences. The format's exactly the same and the courses have no changes. Even if you might say that this, well, obviously AEW 18 will have different obstacles. Yes, but in the qualifiers and semis, that barely matters. And from what I've been told personally, the racing course design isn't going to get much better going into AEW 18. In addition to getting any three-way racing gimmicks getting shoved in there because that's going to make the show more interesting. That part is besides the point, but it just makes Kai's stance as a champion just mean a lot less. All he can do is do it again. And yeah, that's basically my speech on the race between Kai Beckstrand and Noah Meunier. To put it simply, the show did not do a good job building up both these ninjas throughout their storied careers. They were standing on their stats and nothing else, and we really didn't know much about them as competitors. Beyond that. Take their stats away, and these competitors aren't really all that notable. They may still be a Beckstrand, but but as previously mentioned, it still is not my point here. Kai Beckstrand and Noah Meunier, as sad as this to say, aren't as iconic as Daniel Gil and Austin Gray were coming into their final matchups. This will be important going into the future of AEW. AEW 18 will obviously promote both Kai Beckstrand and Noah Meunier as the top competitors going into the season, in addition to the other members of even just the top 32 of the previous season. Aside from the competitors who aren't competing, those are the ninjas to look out for going into that season. It's most just because of how well they did, not because of who they are, unless they are previous veterans. Previous veterans from before this age. That's from before this era of AEW. It's like Daniel Gil or something. And especially with less of these veterans, such as a competitor like Joe Mowalski, not competing as much, yeah, we are stuck with these teenagers who don't have much to them aside from their stats. I have another video that I'm going to be making sometime, probably next year, talking about the veterans of AEW and how this show's format and editing has gone to alienate them, and make me really question why some of them are even competing at this point. A big point in that video will most definitely be the fact that the show is relying on its teenagers who have nothing but their stats to back them up, which is basically for the same reason as we were talking about here today. It is the same reason why Kai Beckstrand and Noah Meunier weren't easy to cheer for in the final matchup, at least for me. And I hope you guys understand why I have this hot take about Kai Beckstrand's win, about the matchup between Kai Beckstrand and Noah Meunier, and in addition to that, Kai Beckstrand's win means basically nothing going into the next season of AEW and the future of the show as a whole. The show can't get better than this. And the individual competitors are suffering because of it. That's my stance. And that's it for this video. So, what's next? Well, I just got done talking about the finale of Season 17. But what about the finales for all the other seasons of AEW? And the people who ended up winning? That's next week's video. A video I have been teasing for months. A career deep dive on everyone who has claimed a Kandenseha in American Ninja Warrior. The 6 who have claimed total victory. Isaac Cordero, Jeff Witten, Drew Dressel, Daniel Gil, Vance Walker, and Caleb Bookstrom. Those are the people we are going to be talking about next week. I will see you guys there. Peace.